Hey everybody, so welcome back. This is the second part of Tarot 101. So as we discussed yesterday, we talked about the differences between tarot cards and oracle cards. And like I said before, the differences between those two is that tarot is always made up of 78 cards with very specific cards within the deck. And then oracle cards can have any number of cards in that deck, and they usually have like special messages and are very customized based off of the author who created the cards. So that's where we're picking up off of from. So I talked a little bit briefly about the structure and organization of the tarot deck. So it's 78 cards split into two specific categories. We've got the Major Arcana and the Minor Arcana. And the Major Arcana consists of 22 cards, and the Minor Arcana consists of 56. Major Arcana is, as I said, it was mainly like, it's, when we look at the cards, you'll see that it's actually like a specific timeline. Like when you put the pictures in order, you're going to see that there's a very clear storyline to it. It's almost as if you're reading a book, but with pictures. Whereas the Minor Arcana is somewhat similar in that there are like phases of life and chapters, especially within the numerology of the Minor Arcana, but there's also the addition of the suit. So it's, like I said in the previous video, the creation of the actual 52 card playing deck with the 4 suits is derived from tarot. So that's what you're going to see is the 4 suits, and then you're going to see an ace through king, but they've added on a page. So instead of just Jack, Queen, King, it's page, Knight, Queen, King. So we'll cover that in the next video, but today's video is all about the Major Arcana. So I have just the 22 cards right here in front of me. I split them apart. Here's the other part of the deck. And so I wanted to show you card by card what the Major Arcana looks like. So now if you have a deck of your own, or if you're considering getting a deck that you're wanting to learn tarot with, I highly, highly recommend the Radiant Rider Waite Tarot, because it's it's a rendition that is more vibrant and more colorful in comparison to the original Rider Waite deck. Like there's a little bit of history involved in it, but basically tarot has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. Some people say that it dates all the way back to ancient Egypt, but the actual 78 organizational system of the cards wasn't necessarily common mainstream until I think it was about the 17 or 1800s. And originally tarot was actually a playing card game, and eventually it was picked up by fortune tellers and people who read the cards, and it became, you know, what it is today, a tool of divination. And I lost my train of thought. But so there were these two I think it was 2 authors and an artist who came together and redid the rendition. I think it was around like the 1940s or the 1950s when they redid the artwork surrounding these cards, and kind of a bit more modernized version of it basically. And so the Radiant Rider Waite is just the more vibrant version off of the regular Rider Waite. Like, see if I can, let me see if I can show you the difference. Here's the regular Rider Waite Tarot right here. This isn't the exact same card, but you can see the difference, right? You can see this is the original and this is the Radiant. You can see that there's much more line work. It's a bit grainier. It's a bit more simplistic. Whereas the Radiant Rider Waite, there's more vibrancy to it. There's more depth. And so, like I was saying in the previous video, depending on the deck that you have, it might result in different ways in which you interpret the cards, and therefore potentially the way in which your intuition flows out naturally while you're reading them. So I either suggest just getting a regular Rider Waite tarot deck or the Radiant one, depending on what might fit better for your tastes if you are interested in getting started with tarot. You can, if you feel called to work with different decks like this, like I said before, this is the Sorcerer's Tarot, do it. Like the whole idea of picking a deck that works best for you is simply just either walking into a store or going online and seeing which images, which energies from the deck speaks to you, which you feel like is an outside emulation of yourself. So some people pick up random decks. I think one of my very first decks was actually a fairy deck, and I connected with that really well. But then I found that I got even more in tune with the cards themselves once I turned to the classics. So there's that. Okay, so I've got all of the Major Arcana organized numerically. So I'll just break it down for you and we'll just kind of talk through each card as we go. So here's the Fool. And you can see actually everything is Roman numerals, numbered Roman numerically. And so this is different in comparison to the Minor Arcana, in which you'll see like, it'll say the word two of swords, etc. 2, 3, whatever. So this is one sign that you know that it's a part of the Major Arcana. And so a lot of people, when they're teaching tarot, they actually say that it's very similar to the hero's journey. And so those of you that have taken an English class, you'll know that the hero's journey is a very common way in which fiction writers write novels in order to portray a story of a specific hero, right? So the Major Arcana has the same exact idea, but it's the story of the Fool. They always call it the Fool's Journey. And it's really cool, actually. You can find a lot of resources and materials out there that do guided meditations with tarot. And I thought that that was interesting. I personally like to journal when I'm reading tarot, because I find that, like, say I'm studying the tarot and I want to keep notes on a specific card and like different things that are evoked within a reading, but are still, like, say I'm reading the Fool in multiple different types of readings, but I'm pulling out different information as a result. That's something that I like to keep track of in a journal, just because it's so interesting to me to see how I can pick up a bunch of different information based off of, you know, the combination of cards and the placement in which they're in. So anyway, so we start off with 0, the Fool. So the Fool, whenever I'm teaching tarot, I always encourage people to first describe what they're seeing, right? So you're looking at the picture, and what do you see? You see a man, looks like he's looking up into the world. He's probably singing to himself. He's very joyous. It almost looks as if he's skipping. He's wearing very nice robes. He's probably someone who's well off, but he's carrying a knapsack. He's carrying a rose. He could be someone in love, who knows? But it looks like he's very clearly walking off a cliff. And he's got a little dog at the bottom there trying to warn him of his impending doom, basically. And so it's not necessarily an impending doom card per se, but the idea of this card is to embrace the journey and to embrace the idea that maybe it's okay not to know exactly where you're going at all points in life, and to just enjoy the ride. That's the energy from this card. So let's move on. Here we have the Magician. So the idea is that in the story of the Fool's journey, the Fool originally begins his journey just blindly unaware of his surroundings and just passionate about being victorious in whatever it is that he's setting out on, he or she. And the first thing that they come across is the Magician. And the Magician is a character in the story that specifically is meant to help guide them along their journey. Now, you'll see, like, if you're learning about manifestation or the law of attraction, they always talk about how manifestation has 3 stages to it, right? It's thought, word, action. And the Magician represents the thought process of manifestation. Again, Look at the picture. What are you seeing? What's the story that's being told? You see a man in robes, potentially someone that is very religious or someone that works with magic. You see that he's holding a candle, a double flame candle. There's an infinite symbol above him. And then here we have the wand, the cups, the pentacles, and the swords. And these are the suits, actually, that are seen in the Minor Arcana. And this card represents an overall mastery of the different elements, right? He's able to utilize these skills and show that he can manipulate the elements to work to his will. And that's basically the idea of manifestation, is creating and manipulating energy to manifest specific things into your reality. But it always starts with a thought. So that's the point of the magician. The High Priestess is the second phase of manifestation. So now we're into word. And the High Priestess, there's a lot of symbolism within the cards that's related to theology, mythology, and I encourage you to look those up too, and probably in a different video we'll dive more deeply into those specific symbolisms. But the point of this video is to basically just show you how to look at a card and understand from just taking it in and asking what kind of emotion is being evoked by looking at this card. Asking yourself what lessons are in this card. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, rather than memorizing a bunch of different, I think this is a symbol for Beelzebub. I don't remember this one, but see, exactly, like, I don't necessarily remember the specific mythological symbols within the cards, but that doesn't necessarily matter for me. It might for other tarot readers, but it's important to you that you learn and expand on your own. And maybe down the road I will learn these more as time goes on. But for now, I just like paying attention to the story, getting to know who this character is, right? So we have the High Priestess. And so this is the second character in the story of the Fool's Journey. So he comes across this lady who clearly is someone who carries wisdom. I think she's holding the Torah in her hands. She has the symbol for the goddess. We have both the crescent moons and the full moon representing the maiden, mother, and crone. The pomegranates in the back are a sign of life, a symbolism of life. And then the moon at the bottom represents new moon energy. So she is a type of energy who brings you knowledge, brings you understanding. And because we have the number 2 in this card, and also the 2 pillars, she is always known as someone who gives you the knowledge that you need in order to make a decision. So we have 0 and 1, it's like the beginning of the journey, taking the very first steps. And now we're faced with a situation where we have to make a choice. We're at a fork in the road. And that's why she's here to help. She gives you the knowledge that you need in order to help you make this decision. And you'll see this throughout all of tarot. You'll see that the numerology comes into play a lot, especially in the Minor Arcana. And it helped me greatly when I was learning it myself to connect the numerology and what that number represents with the symbolism of the suit. And so, same thing here. She represents choice, she represents knowledge, she represents spirituality, divinity, mediumship, that kind of thing. So that's the High Priestess. Next, we have the Empress. So we have the number 3 here, and we can see that there's a woman who kind of looks pregnant. Again, she's wearing a dress with pomegranates, and she's in a wheat field, looking like a very plentiful, harvestable farming area or a plantation of sorts. There's the symbolism for the female. And the High Priestess, the number 3, represents, like we were talking about, thought, word, action. Now we're on to the stage of action in the terms of manifestation. So the Fool then comes across the Empress, and she is able to bring into fruition the things that he has been seeking, you know. And so This is always an amazing card to get when you're specifically working on manifesting. It is always a sign that tells you you're on the right track. You're about to manifest here very, very soon, or you already have. So that's number 3, is manifesting. Next, we move on to the Emperor, which is number 4. So again, you can see a wise man sitting on a throne. It's very sturdy. It's made of, looks like, stone or cement. He has beautiful robes, a long beard, someone who is, I would say, very secure in their position and strategical, logical, at peace, right? So when you think of the number 4, I always think of 4 walls, 4 pillars, and so therefore I go for foundation or stability. And so the Emperor can represent that, and these energies of these cards can even represent specific people in your lives too. So this might represent like a father figure in your life, and then the Empress could be a mother figure, that kind of a thing, or any person in your life that represents that type of energy, right? So even if you had an uncle that was your father, or a grandfather, that kind of an idea. So next we move on to the Hierophant. And just looking at the story again, we have what looks like a religious hierarch with people worshiping him below. Again, we have the 2 pillars, but this time it feels different. It's the Hierophant represents authority and commitments. It's the idea of traditional values. And so the number 5, when you think of the number 5, it actually creates a bit of stagnation in the stable 4 that we saw just before with the Emperor. And so it's an expansion in a good way. It's kind of like uncomfortable growth. But the Hierophant represents authority. So, and again, I think that when you just take the time to look at these cards and listen to what the pictures and the numbers are telling you, it's very easy to come to the conclusion as to what you believe this card is wanting to spark within your intuition. Next, one of my favorite cards is the Lovers. We again get back into a state of balance. We have 2 3s balancing out each other. The eternal male and female being watched over by an angel. We have bright sun in the distance, and then a volcano. So this could potentially represent Adam and Eve, especially with the serpent right here and the eternal fruit. But again, it's reaching another state of balance. So that's the whole idea of the Fool's journey, is it's kind of basically his life's journey to awakening or to enlightenment. So maybe he, at this point in his life, has found his partner who is able to help shoulder the burden or to bring peace. It's a partnership that is kind of like that partner of crime kind of idea. So a lot of happy vibes here. Next is the Chariot. So again, when we were talking about that break from 4 to 5, now we're going from 5 to 6. So a little bit more uncomfortable growth, right? And so when you look at the Chariot, you have a warrior who is literally sitting on a chariot that is being run by 2 sphinxes, both of different colors. And this brings me back to the Hierophant, not the Hierophant, the High Priestess with the 2 different pillars, right? And so the idea behind the Chariot is trying to find a common ground between 2 opposing forces, an uphill battle that is vital for your growth. If you're able to bring these 2 opposing forces together, if you're able to work together as a team, you'll see success. That's the main idea behind this card. And so a lot of it has to do with perseverance and persistence. Yeah. So next we're on to Strength. So again, we're back into a state of even or balance, right? So Strength, you have a woman gently opening the jaws of a lion, And this card never really represents, I think that's the point, is that it doesn't represent physical strength. It represents strength of will. It represents the strength of loving peace for other living animals, other people. And so it's about having the strength within yourself, having a sense of self-worth, that you know that you're able to move mountains without having to prove that to anyone else. And so again, just looking at the picture, she looks like she has an extremely calm demeanor. She has the infinity symbol above her head, which always to me represents someone who's enlightened or awakened or just has the eternal understanding on the meaning of life, on the purpose of life, and just gently guiding the lion to feel safe to open its jaws and to allow her to put her hands into those jars. So this is strength. Next, we have the Hermit. And the Hermit is the 9th card of the Major Arcana, and it is a single man holding what looks like a star within his lantern. And he's alone out at night. He could be out in the snow, maybe on a mountain. And the Hermit represents being at peace with going within, with spending time with the self, with taking the time to learn, to gain knowledge, and not feeling the need to, again, like strength, not feeling the need to be around others or the need to impress other people. This is all about growing the self and working on your relationship with yourself more than anything. So that's the Hermit. Next is the Wheel of Fortune. So now basically the 10s always represent like the end of a journey. We've reached the end of a chapter, and rather than it being done and dusted and, you know, we're completely done and on to the next, the idea really is that you've reached the end of this chapter, but it doesn't mean that it's over forever. It's always a part of you, and it's always a lesson that you will come back to and learn from again and again and again in life. We have, I think they're the 4 fixed zodiac signs. I think it's Taurus, Leo, what is that, Virgo, and Sagittarius? I can't remember. I have to look it up. But anyway, you have the 4 fixed zodiac signs covering the wheel, and then there's a Sphinx cover on top of the Wheel of Fortune. And again, it represents life cycles. An ending leads to a beginning, the never-ending Ouroboros, or the never-ending circle. And so it encourages people to remember that life isn't necessarily linear. We don't go through paths of life leaving behind the lessons and the teachings that we have taken a lesson away from. It's like the infinite spiral that is just continuously moving upward, and you're continuously growing, even though it might feel like at times you're coming back to the same point in the circle in which you've learned the same lesson. You're still at a higher state of understanding and personal evolution in order to take away, you know, the next piece of the lesson, the next piece of the puzzle. So that represents number 10 of the Major Arcana. So there are 11 more cards. The next card is Justice. So again, like you see similar environments as the High Priestess, the Hierophant, even the Emperor a little bit. But look at what he's got in his hands. He has the scales that represent law and literally justice, and then the sword. Swords in the tarot are representative of the air element, or mental thinking, knowledge, education, intellectual thinking. And so a lot of it is about taking the higher ground and analyzing all of your choices, options, scenarios, and then making a swift, just decision that is, you know, a good, benefiting, and compromising decision for any parties involved. So it's always really interesting to get this card in readings too, just because it always reminds me that, you know, life is about the balance of, you know, yin versus yang, light versus dark. And so I always tend to take that kind of like mentality with life in general. And so whenever I get this card in a reading, it just kind of catches me off guard, because sometimes I get so caught up in the moment and I just, you know, want something to go a certain way for me. And so then this card brings me back to reality basically, and is like, okay, you need to remember that if you do not have yin, you cannot understand what yang is to begin with. Yang doesn't exist without yin, if that makes sense. So that's why I like this card. It's like a healthy, tough love reminder for basically for me. So then we have the Hanged Man. And again, it's a man who is literally hanging by one foot upside down. His crown chakra is shining. He has a halo around his head. The crown chakra is the energy that is above the crown of your head. And it represents your connection to source, to the universe, to your psychic abilities, that kind of a thing. And the thing that's interesting about the Hanged Man is that he's at such peace with the situation that he's in, even though his life has literally been turned upside down and he sees everything from a completely new perspective. He's at peace with that, because seeing things from this new perspective has taught him valuable lessons about life and about how sometimes it's beneficial to sometimes see things from another person's point of view or from their shoes, that kind of a thing. And in life, it's important to voluntarily become the Hanged Man. So that's him. Next, we have Death, number 13. So this is the card that people tend to be afraid of a lot, because the media portrays this card as like, you're actually gonna die. But you're not. My belief in life, I do believe in reincarnation, and so whenever I see the Death card, even if it does actually represent physical death, which I never take it as that, basically, I always take it as the end of a chapter, moving on to the next phase of life. The death of things, energies in our life that are no longer serving us, the concept of bless and release. That's what the Death card, the number 13 card, represents. We have what looks like a Grim Reaper sitting on a white horse carrying a flag, with a king begging what looks like for his life, and then 2 children beneath him, and one whom looks like already, oh no wait, the king is already, this is the king down here, and then I think that this is a priest. And you can see that Death has taken mercy on the children underneath him. I don't know what he's deciding about the priest, but I think what I feel like happened in this picture is that, you know, the king was taking advantage of his people, or not being a fair ruler to his lands. And so it was time for a succession to move on, to end this chapter and to move on to a different time of ruling. That's literally, like, if I were to look at this photo, that's the interpretation that I would make myself. So that's the whole point of it, is encouraging you to do the same thing when you're looking at these pictures yourself. Journaling it, maybe saying it out loud to yourself, what these things all mean, you know, so on and so forth. So the next card is Temperance. And this card represents, so we have an angel here with the symbol for water, and she's got 2 cups, and she's pouring water back and forth in her hands, very much like a slinky, like the idea of going back and forth, back and forth. And so the idea of temperance is actually the concept of alchemy, which is an ancient practice where alchemists believed that they could turn different metals into gold. I think they were trying to turn water into gold at one point, but it's the idea of having the patience to allow for the energy to change in order for that conversion to happen. And so this is like the eternal, like you need to wait card. That's what I take away from Temperance. Next card is the Devil. This is number 15 in the deck. So you can see the return of the Lovers, but this time they are shackled and they are standing beneath the Devil. And this card basically represents not actual like demonic possessions. It represents temptation, addiction, the things of lower vibrational energy that could be associated with the Devil's energy. And it could represent codependent relationships. It could represent unhealthy need to abuse substances, that kind of idea. And the Devil is just basically a personification of these feelings. And so it's completely within your power to free yourself of these shackles. And it has nothing to do with being trapped by some other third party. It's all in your head. And so, again, another card that people within the mainstream media tend to inflate as something that's a bit more of an inflammatory or scary card. And again, you just have to recognize it as a life lesson. Like, what is the message in this card that is speaking to you? Next card is the Tower. We have 6 cards left. So this is the Tower in the Major Arcana. And this, I mean, look at it, right? You've got a tower that is just filled with a ton of unfortunate events. You have lightning striking it, it's on fire, it's on the top of a mountain that no one can reach and therefore no one can help. There's flames flying out of the windows and people falling out of the windows, and it's just total catastrophe. It's the concept of having the rug pulled out from underneath you and just not having any awareness whatsoever into what has happened, what has gone down, and just feeling completely powerless to the way in which the energies are shifting. I like to think of this as something similar to like a hurricane or literally like a lightning strike. It's a natural disaster that is specifically meant to clean house. It's there to very quickly encourage change that is necessary, and that if it didn't happen, you would have gone down an even darker path and have potentially experienced something even more catastrophic than something such as this. For some people, this could literally mean like having to rebuild a house. Like it could physically mean that their house was destroyed. Or it could just mean that their social circle has changed, you know, that kind of thing. So you can take it as literally as you want or as metaphorically as you want. Okay. My favorite card of the entire deck is the Star. The Wish Fulfillment card. Oh, I love this card. You have a woman pouring water back into a river and pouring water onto the ground, basically to water plants. Reciprocity, balance, wish fulfillment. That's what I get from this card. Total peace and comfort. The Moon is another card I resonate with. It is representative of intuition, mystery, darkness, and maybe sometimes some fear and anxiety surrounding that. But it's the idea of needing to go with your gut, trusting your gut, and trusting that you will find the path. You know, the path is there, even though it might not be as clearly lit for you as you would hope for it to be. But it is there for you. So you have to use your different senses than what you're potentially used to using most often. And that can mean trusting your gut. It can mean utilizing your sense of hearing, your sense of smell, You know, it's just a challenge to try things from a different angle. The Sun is the Eternal Yes card. It's the most positive card in the deck. It can represent a new birth. It can represent a potential new lover. You know, it's anytime you get this card, maybe if you're asking like a yes or no question to the cards and you get this card, it's a yes. It's a, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, also sunflowers are my favorite flower, by the way. So anytime I see sunflowers, I'm just instantly in a good mood. Second to last, we have Judgment. You see people rising from their graves, calling up to an angel who's calling for them. It's a resurrection. It's a rebirthing. It's a second chance card. Yeah. Just coming back. Maybe you made a mistake and this card is saying it's okay to have a second chance, or maybe you were in a relationship and this card comes up and this person that you were in a relationship with has hurt you, and this card comes up and it's saying, why don't you just give them a second chance and things will work out for the better, or maybe there are more lessons that you need to learn within this relationship that you hadn't gotten the chance to learn yet. Okay, and now the last card, very similar to the Wheel of Fortune in my opinion, is the World. Again, we have the 4 fixed zodiac signs, the Taurus, the Leo, Virgo, and I really want to say Sagittarius. I'm pretty darn sure it is. Yeah. Again, we have that circular, what looks like, a wreath, like a holly wreath, and then a woman carrying 2 double flamed candles. So these always represent infinity to me as well. Again, it's the end of a cycle, but the beginning of a new one. The concept that things are never really over, but you can put this lesson to peace. You're ready to move on to the next adventure in life. So yeah. So that ended up going a lot longer than I thought it would, but this is the Major Arcana. There are 22 cards. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Be sure to let me know if you have any specific questions or if you want to talk about this more. The next video I will be looking at, we'll be looking at all 4 of the suits, but we're going to go in numerical order. So we're going to take, starting with the Magician, and we're going to compare this to the 4 aces within the Minor Arcana. And we might do, I haven't timed it out yet, but we'll probably do more than just that in one video's time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for sticking with me until the end. Have a good day. Bye.